Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to see you all here this evening, the first of our district and borough meetings in Suffolk. As you may know, we have a series of these once a year where it's all about yourselves. You can ask any question you like about anything related to policing or victims or anything in that perspective. I'd just like to introduce Gareth Wilson in the middle here, who's our temporary Chief Constable, as Douglas Paxton is still on sick leave. And on the far side there is Tristan Pepper. And both of these gents will be talking to you for a little bit after I've said a few introductory words. So, well, you know who I am, so I don't really need to do any more than that. I often like to start off with a little quote here, and there we are, one there from Mr. Churchill. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. So I'm not asking for any plaudits for that. But also what it takes to sit down and listen, and that's of course where you come in, so you can ask whatever question you like. It is being filmed tonight. We're very pleased to welcome John, who filmed all our meetings last year, and we'll be putting those up on the website, and I hope everybody is quite comfortable with that. So just a few introductory comments. I'll whiz around this jigsaw before I hand on to the others, and you'll all be aware that it's quite a challenging time at the moment for the constabulary, and the budget reductions we've got in a time of austerity are like to endure. So we've got just over £20 million to save by 2020. The current budget is £124 million of taxpayers' money. So that is quite a challenge, but it is not insurmountable. Okay, there is no need for doom and gloom. I would like to point out there are quite a lot of other policing and security forces available and resources, such as National Counter-Terrorism Network. That's got a budget of 450 million, the National Crime Agency, a budget of 650 million, and the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, where there's over 250 people work for them, and that's a resource that we can pull in to bolster what we're doing here in Suffolk. I also want to make it very clear that policing is a really, really important, if not one of the most important public services, because if we do not feel safe and confident in our domestic and business lives, then we might as well pack up and go home. Now that is not to say that everything done is perfect, because it isn't, and my role as the Police and Crime Commissioner in that elected position is to hold the constabulary to account through the Chief Constable for the way they do operational policing. They have operational independence, but to just set it in context, the PCC is overall in charge of the budget. You set the precept, that did go up this year for the first time in 3 years, a small increase. I'm not of the belief that the only way you improve things is by chucking yet more of other people's money at it. We have to be more business-like and more efficient. There's a change in the way that we are policing, talking about managing demand and so on. That's very, very important. We need, or will be needing to do more ourselves, but we also need to make sure that other bodies in the public sector do their fair share of work as well. We are not a mental health institution or an ambulance service. Issues when it comes to, for example, safeguarding of children and vulnerable people, social service and others, yes, they're under pressure, but so is the constabulary, and it's a matter of sitting down and talking to each other of how we sort this out. Do not keep shunting everything onto the police, because we might have to be in a position of starting to shunt it back. So if we join things up, I do think that is the way forward, so that's very, very important. Partnership working there, of course, is very, very important. We've got a good track record of delivering in Suffolk. Some of the policing collaboration with Norfolk has worked very well. You'll remember just over a year ago, of course, I did take the decision to keep the control room here in Suffolk. I'm absolutely convinced that was the right thing to do. But we developed many partnerships, particularly, for example, with Fire and Rescue. We have several shared premises with them, and we've got a £5 million grant for another 11 developments over the next year or two as well. So that's really important. It is also the case that the Audit Office, National Audit Office, said of all the constabularies in England and Wales, we have the second highest contribution made for savings through collaboration. So we do have an established track record of delivering when it counts. Moving on to victims and vulnerable people, you may be aware that Police and Crime Commissioners in England and Wales took over victims commissioning for all victims of crime, the service of that in October of last year. That's a fundamental change, and at last we have been able to put victims at the centre of the criminal justice system. Long way to go, of course. Not everything is perfect there again, but at least it is a pretty sound start. Commissioning and grants, the constabulary again has been quite successful, getting investment from government resources for things like automatic number plate recognition. That's a very good resource that is now being spread out into rural areas as well. It's not just about the A14 and the major trunk roads. The Transformation Challenge Award, which involves ourselves and the local government family and others, we've been given £5.2 million from the government to start to put services together. Now these are big benefits of Suffolk, and we need to do a lot more there as we move forwards. One of the things we're particularly proud of is the £700,000 that are ring-fenced for supporting the voluntary and community sector in Suffolk. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, without the efforts of the voluntary and the community sector, Suffolk would be a lot worse off. If you were to suddenly remove the voluntary and community sector, I think Suffolk would be in a dreadful position, and we do need to thank all of those who do work in these very important sectors. Another thing we've been able to do is to commission research. You may have seen the headlines recently on the very difficult problem that we need to confront in Suffolk on domestic abuse. It beggars belief that some of the brutality and depraved attitude of certain individuals. This was a qualitative piece of research that spoke to 52 victims of domestic abuse, many professionals as well, and the system does need a lot of improvement. And it's something that we take very, very seriously, and the Constabulary are helping to lead forward an action plan or develop an action plan that I hope lots of people will contribute to. Doing surveys is important. For example, 2 years ago, at about this time, we launched our speeding survey across the county. That seems to be an issue that comes up at all public meetings, and there is a change, or was a change, in the way the Constabulary deployed enforcement, so more emphasis is given to rural areas, residential areas. It's not about trying to catch people out just on the A14. I'm not saying that is important, because it is. But where we need to respond to communities, that is vital. And we are also putting quite a lot of support into schemes like we have here in Eye for community speedwalks and so on. And there is money available to extend that throughout the county as well. So innovation, this is where of course technology will be very important as we change the way policing is done. A lot of money going to evidence-based policing so that we can actually direct resources to where they're needed most. New forms of crime, you're probably aware a lot more now is being done via the internet, cyber-enabled crime. The whole pattern is changing, and it's very, very important that we are able to respond on your behalf to make sure that crimes that are important to people are being dealt with. A lot more being done on social media, financial fraud. These are the sorts of things that someone can carry out just sitting in their bedroom or their office, and you don't need to go around the corner and knock someone out or assault or anything like that. It's completely different. That's not to say these other traditional forms of crimes don't exist. Of course they do, but the pattern is changing quite rapidly. So preventing and reducing crime, of course, is key, and I think that's where we all have a responsibility as citizens and business to do what we can to improve community safety. There's a vast amount to do on that, and that will in itself mean that if we prevent crime in the first place, we're able to concentrate the resources where we need them on protecting people in vulnerable situations and homes and businesses. That's really, really important. That's a really, really quick whiz through of everything, and I'm going to hand over to Gareth in a minute. But please think of any questions you'd like to ask about anything when the three of us have just finished speaking. So here we are, Gareth.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tim. I guess the first thing for me to cover is my role. Tim's mentioned already he's got the overall responsibility for the budget and in terms of policing in general, but it's my role to put into practice the operational elements of policing and specifically to address the issues that Tim has identified through his consultation with people like yourselves are priorities for the organisation. So he works the police and crime plan, and at the accountability and performance meeting we will go through those issues that Tim has identified as priorities, and he will ask me in a public forum what it is that the Constabulary are doing in relation to each particular aspect that he has raised. And that session allows, as I say, in a very public way, for me to describe what the organisation are doing and what the organisation are intending to do. Most importantly, I guess, what you can see is that when there's a spike in relation to the reporting of serious sexual offences, or there are issues around the response to 999 calls, we're able to publicly outline exactly what those issues are, exactly what the positives are, and exactly what we're going to do about those issues which do need some form of redress. The policing challenges in the county, there we go, the policing challenges in the county, Tim's alluded to these really, and it's really interesting. If I can cast my mind back to when I first started, crime was very, very visible. You had people outside of nightclubs, you had fighting, you had burglaries, you had theft from motor vehicles. Everything was really quite visible. You still get those, but actually we've seen through the British Crime Survey and also through local recording that what we I guess like to call the traditional type of crime going down. But what's happened is the demand on the organisation has actually stayed constant, because what was in the public space is now very much hidden, and hidden harm, I think we described it as earlier on. That may be teenagers sitting in a bedroom on a computer where people are committing offences, and the only people that know anything about it are the person that's committing it and the person sitting at the other end. Now that creates a huge challenge for us as an organisation, because of course if you had what I would call the traditional type of crime, where you had two people sitting outside a nightclub, they decide to have a fight, really easy to deal with, really easy to detect, because they're both standing there. If you've got the more hidden type of crime, you could actually have people who are committing offences that live on the other side of the world, that are committing offences against people that sit in their bedroom in one of the houses in Eye. So it really is a different challenge, but we're rising to that challenge, and we will adapt our organisation to make sure that we can deal with it. So for example, there's been investment made through a business case we've put through the Police and Crime Commissioner with regard to our cybercrime unit and how we are better able to deal with those more technological crimes. Tim mentioned two things. First of all, demand. Now, I've got to find £20.5 million worth of savings, and everything we do, we're reporting up through Tim to show what we're doing to mitigate any risks that are presented. But it's really quite straightforward for me. If we can reduce the calls for service on our organisation, we can do better with those staff who are left behind after the cuts are made. And we are doing it. We're working with local authorities, we have mental health workers working with the constabulary. We've implemented systems within our control room, which means that those incidents that are of the higher risks are dealt with in a more detailed way and pushed up the line, whereas others which require perhaps advice are actually given that advice rather than dispatching a police officer or a PCSO to deal with it. So, as I say, it's in one way very, very simple, and that is that we reduce our demand, and by reducing demand, we can provide a service for less and with less staff. Now, the next issue is in relation to the organisation's development through change. It's a complex picture. We have some really good asset that we can draw upon. Tim mentioned the Eastern Region Specialist Operations Unit. They're people that provide such things as investigation into complex frauds. They'll look at intelligence around those people that create harm within our societies through drug dealing. They're a very, very, very useful asset for us. And whereas before we had a few staff working in that area, we now have access to a significant number of staff, albeit they service a broader area, but when we have those high-risk operations, we have those at our beck and call. And having sat on a meeting which actually tasks those units, I can tell you that Suffolk does get a good deal from the Eastern Region Specialist Operations Unit. We also have the Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit as well that Tim's mentioned, and we also have our collaboration work between Norfolk and Suffolk. We also have our collaboration with local authorities and local public sector providers. So you can see it's a fairly complex picture, but we do coordinate it all. And we have a meeting where we go through every single initiative that's being dealt with, Every single possible option that we can have to collaborate are discussed at those meetings and coordinated, and we actually come through with a decision based upon what's best for the people within Suffolk. Tim discussed as well some of the technological innovations, and there have been some really significant moves in relation to this in the past 12 months. Tim mentioned automatic number plate recognition. Now, just to picture the scene, if you can think about how long it takes a police officer to observe a car, to actually then relay through the radio to an operator at the other end a registration number, and you wait for that result to come back through the police national computer, you can see it's a fairly laborious, long process. Automatic number plate recognition will check thousands upon thousands of cars a day at specific locations. It will flag up to the control room who is driving through our county, where there are certain flags on their vehicle which says, actually, we're not too happy about this particular person, you know, we need to keep an eye on them. We do keep an eye on them. Where a car is stolen, where a car has no insurance, no MOT, these are all aspects that the automatic number plate recognition system can notify us in the control room, and then the control room can dispatch an individual. You can see how much more efficient it is. Therefore, we've got less money, but we do more with it. And if we do more with it, we can still provide that service to the people of Suffolk. We've also got Athena, which is a multi-force computer system, which has been introduced in Essex and will be introduced into our county later on in the year. This system, for the first time, will allow officers from Suffolk to check intelligence that has been placed on the system from those in Essex, those in Kent, those in Norfolk, and then as it's rolled out through the other counties in the eastern region as well. We're also hoping that it will go further afield, and of course the more forces that are involved in it, the richer the picture as to who is within our county and the threats that they actually present to our communities, so we can do much better work against them in a much more targeted way. There are two other aspects I just want to cover. The first is mobile working. We all suffer, I'm sure, lack of mobile phone availability when we travel through the beautiful countryside that is Suffolk. We had that same problem with our mobile computers as well. Our staff at the moment still go backwards and forwards to their police station to deal with an incident and then go back in and put it on the computer. We've now started to roll out a computer system which does allow them access remotely through 3G networks and also through enhanced Wi-Fi systems that we have. That means they no longer have to go back to the police station. So that wasted time in the journey to and from an incident to the police station to record something where they're not visible and then to go back out again, you can see how that's an inefficient use of police time. But with mobile working, it will mean that we can do more with less staff. The final one is body-worn videos. You've probably seen these on the news. They talked about it after, I think, a couple of the Metropolitan Police shootings that have taken place. But they have real benefits for whatever type of policing is going on in our communities. It means there is instant access to information that's provided at a scene and evidence that's there as well. And we discussed earlier on the issues around domestic abuse. What could be better than recording a victim, saying exactly what's happened to them, having a look at the perpetrator and finding out exactly what they're saying at the scene, rather than leaving it until later on in the day when you have to go back and you have to speak to them in detail around it. It also means that officers that go out and about know that they have the body-worn video on them. If somebody makes a complaint against them, then our professional standards department can look if the video is operating and see exactly what was taking place. All of these aspects have seen that within those areas, the level of complaints have reduced. The evidence that's provided in relation to specific crimes has been enhanced. And as you can see, the message that I'm giving is, if you have that, it makes us more efficient. We can therefore do more with less. The final area I want to cover is perhaps the most important. and that's supporting the response to demands placed upon the public sector in Suffolk. And this to me is perhaps one of the most exciting innovations within the county at the moment. It cannot be right that we have members of the community that need our service, that need the services of perhaps social services, of health, of others, that they have different people seeing them from different agencies. It's absolutely right that the public sector within Suffolk has a duty to provide a service to those that are within our county. It's really important that the work that we're currently doing under the Transformation Challenge Award fund that was successfully gained from central government, that we actually start to understand as a county what the demands are that are being placed on the public sector, understanding the response that we currently have as a public sector, and then try and work out joint working solutions where we're actually going to look at how in particular localities the whole public sector can join together and provide a unified service and stop that repetition between agencies. If we manage to do that, again, it makes it more efficient, makes us more efficient, makes the public services more efficient. We can reduce demand because we deal with things at the first point of call. But in addition to that, we're no longer having that duplication and overlap that we see between the different agencies. I think at that point, I'll hand across to just a...
Okay, thanks, John.
Evening, everybody. I'm just going to start by just giving a brief overview of our statistics and performance. I've just sort of picked a few headlines. I could probably drone on for hours about performance, but I won't bore you with those. So here we go. There's just a few there for you. Good news, really. The top one particularly I find pleasing because I think it's important that the way we deal with the public, and that when we've had an interaction, that you are satisfied with the way you've been spoken to. So we do surveys and follow that up, and the news is good, and that satisfaction is on an upward trajectory. So that's the first bit of good news. The next bit, which is equally pleasing for me, is around antisocial behaviour, particularly in the more rural areas and places where perhaps other sorts of crime are less prevalent. Then antisocial behaviour can really, get people going. So it's down a lot. We're still focusing on it, but a 36% reduction is pretty massive, I feel, and I'm very pleased with that. But as I say, on the next slide, you'll see that we still give it priority. And the last one, again, another pleasing figure for me, because that we have sort of bucked the trend here in mid-Suffolk in terms of domestic burglaries, in that they are down. Not by such a huge margin, but again, it is a decrease. And you may have seen on the news that we have got a bit of an issue in the county with various groups of burglars visiting us. There's lots going on in the background, I can assure you, to deal with that. So, all in all, I'm pretty pleased with that. If anybody wants more information on performance, I've got some more detailed figures over there, and please speak to me afterwards. Thank you, Tim. Okay, just then a quick canter through our priorities. We have quarterly priority setting meetings where we invite you, the public, to come along, much in the same format as this meeting here. The idea is that we have a sort of professional conversation with the people that attend, also take into account other information that we're getting along the way, emails and what have you. And then we try and come up with some sort of sensible priorities that the safer neighbourhood teams can tackle. And I'm not going to read them out verbatim, but as you can see, the top two are sort of antisocial behaviour focused. That does tend to become more of an issue as we move into the summer months with the warmer and lighter nights. People get out and about, and obviously, drink is a factor and such like, and it causes annoyance. So we're aiming to do something about that. In Mid Suffolk South, which is the sort of Needham Market, Elmswell, you know, the area along the sort of A14 corridor, if you like. We're also looking at motor vehicles and catalytic converter thefts, which is a perennial problem. Up this way, we're obviously concentrating on sort of target hardening in relation to burglaries and crime reduction advice, and that sort of thing, working with the Neighbourhood Watch. We've got Claude here from the local Neighbourhood Watch, who's a real stalwart and supporter of us, and he does an awful lot in passing information out to his members. And again, lighter nights, garden machinery, expensive lawnmowers, etc. is, you know, it's that sort of time of year. I think Tim might have something to say about that. Last year, I think you were a bit of a victim, weren't you?
Yeah, my brother.
Yeah. So, you know, that is an issue, and we try and just focus people's attention on locking up their expensive garden equipment, because many people have several £1,000s worth of it lying around and perhaps don't give it the necessary attention that they should. Okay. Again, just a few issues here that we're sort of doing. Twitter, I don't know how many of you are tweeters. We've got nearly 2,000 followers now. It's quite a good way of getting out information fast time to the community. If there's something like a collision on one of our main roads, we'll put it out, and then we can put pictures out and all sorts of things. So I don't know how many of you have a simple sort of smartphone, but that's all you need, and you can sign up and follow us, and you can comment either positively or adversely, as people choose to do. But it's a good way of interacting. There's some quite good sort of friendly banter, if you like, that goes across the network. Community Speed Watch. I know for many of you, speeding is a concern. We do what we can with our regular officers, but speed enforcement is quite a sort of resource-intensive process, really. And as you've probably seen, if we go out and do speed enforcement, it doesn't really take too long before everybody's flashing everybody, and then the point of that speed enforcement is soon lost. So what we do is encourage communities who have concerns with speeding to form community speed watches, and you go out as a team and do some speed enforcement in your communities, and that triggers mechanisms. If we get persistent speeders, then that can feed through to our officers, who will go out and have a word with the individuals and ultimately carry out enforcement. Specialist Tactical Support Team, bit of a mouthful there. Well, basically that is our colleagues who are volunteer police officers. They work with us executing warrants and what have you. For instance, we get information that there's someone's growing drugs or something like that. They will go out and pay that person a visit and do all the necessary actions in relation to that, and not just warrants. If we've got events, they'll support us there. Neighbourhood Watch, obviously I referred to Claude. We've rationalised, I think, as I understand it, having spoken to our Neighbourhood Watch liaison clerk, we've rationalised the number of schemes, but they're still very active, and obviously we're constantly looking to increase the schemes. Again, as the Chief Constable alluded to, numbers are we're on the decline of regular officers, so we're looking at all sorts of means of working with the public for you to be our eyes and ears and support us. And then just lastly, rural crime. Clearly very rural area. This is the most rural part of Suffolk, I guess. Last year was a good year in terms of hunting. It was down, I'm talking of hare coursing particularly, less so fox hunting, but hare coursing was down by quite a significant margin. I know Tim is quite keen on dealing with that firmly and robustly. Just one point of interest, you may have seen on the news, it was probably a month or so ago now, there was some fly tipping in Walshamley Willows. We have actually detected that crime, and so that's good news, because we can't tolerate that sort of thing cluttering up the countryside. So there's lots going on. And be assured that we're out there doing the best we can. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Tristan and Gareth. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you. Please feel free to ask any question you like.
Tim,
Charles.
I watched with interest all that's been put up there, but there's nothing that's been on that agenda there that deals with the root cause of crime. I hammer this home at every meeting I go to, and that is the drug situation. I can tell you that if within a matter of 5 miles radius of here, I can tell you 5 deaths caused through drugs. I can tell you that now. Another young lady was rushed into hospital a fortnight ago suffering from that situation. What I'm actually asking you is there a panel that actually concentrates its thoughts on drugs? I want to know the background of this, because at every public meeting that I attend, I bring this up. I brought it up with you last year, Tim, and I know that you had some success. What now begins to worry me is the fact that I was told by someone in the town last night that there is heroin in the area. Now, I mean, if that comes into the villages, the rural, small villages like this, the perpetrators of these drugs have got to be caught. I know that you've made a good success in relation to someone locally here at Broome. I realise all of that. So what I'm actually saying is I want to know how much thought is actually going into the drug situation.
Right. Just very briefly before I hand on to Gareth, I have a particular loathing of drugs culture. We've got to remember organised crime is behind this. These ruthless, vile people will stop at absolutely nothing. They don't care about their victims. They are solely obsessed with making money, never mind the degradation, misery and squalor that they cause. We only have to think back of the Ipswich prostitute murders a few years ago. A lot of that, of course, was to do with drugs, that they were prostitutes, etc., etc. It's a top priority of the police and crime plan. The Special Operations Unit is highly involved in that. We had a visit from the Director General of the National Crime Agency in March, beginning of March, and we take it very, very seriously. Suffolk is on the map nationally. Locally, Gareth and Tristan know that it really is a top priority. So rest assured, everything is being done that we can. We can always do more, of course, I suppose. But Gareth, I think you have that particular version as well.
I do. My background is all around serious and organised crime, drugs infiltration, or infiltration of drugs supply lines, and dealing with amongst other things, drug dealers. It's an absolute priority. It's one of the police and crime plan priorities, and we do report to Tim in the accountability and performance panel that we mentioned earlier on. But most specifically, I guess, is how do we deal with information that comes from the community? The one thing that you've seen as an organisation is that we are concentrating upon something you'll hear us call the threat to harm and risk issues. So in recent years, our whole policing operation has changed towards dealing with those crimes that do have the most effect in terms of harm on our society. So when information comes in from the community, or information comes in from an informant, or we gather it from another agency, that goes into a system. And do you remember me talking earlier on about the Athena system that it's going to come online next year, or this year? That will then go into a system. It will be analysed by a human being who will have a look at it and say, right, okay, what does this tell me? And does it link in with any other intelligence that I've got in relation to that specific individual or that area? When that is dealt with, and it can be formed into what we call actionable intelligence, so something that can be dealt with, it then gets tasked out. You saw Tristan saying that they've got a specials unit that deals specifically with information that comes in from the community. So we deal with it on a local level, but we also deal with it in terms of supply. And there are people in here I know that work within the private sector, and you always look at what your supply lines are, and you look at demand as well. We reduce demand by working with other agencies, and we have got a very good track record in relation to doing that, but we also take out the supply lines. Historically, you'll have seen police forces look at how we can deal with one incident of one person dealing drugs on one occasion. And that's changed. What we actually look at is how we try and take out those higher up in the chain and higher up in the hierarchy. And there have been some really good examples within Suffolk of how we do that. So when the intelligence comes in from the community, and that's where we need to get it from, it is dealt with. It's put into a system, as I say, and we deal with it appropriately. But we've also got a really good track record, and the last one was in relation to the drug dealers up on the coast. We've also had them within Ipswich, but we've had them more broadly as well, where we take out not only them, but we try and take out their supply lines as well. Obviously, that does lead us to London on a number of occasions. We work with the Metropolitan Police to make sure that we can deal with it there and then. But there has been some good records in relation to it, and we are dealing with it as a constant threat that we have to keep an eye on.
I know you cannot always be successful all the time, but you reassured me to a certain extent. But the best reassurance is when you read in the press that they've been prosecuted, the courts, and that's, you know, this is a thing that, you know, that reassures the public.
I agree, and actually this is one of the areas where we do put an awful lot of publicity around. So it is one that we do publicise. We make sure that we do outline that there's a drug route. We outline exactly where they come from as well. So you know, yeah, that's one of the things that we do very much like to publicise.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, Charles. Gentlemen.
Yeah, hello. I do have questions later for specific things, but on this gentleman's point, I have one simple question for the Chief Constable. Is the use of drugs a criminal offence? Is there a law against the use of drugs? Because I have a follow-up question depending on your answer.
It's better than that. It's the possession of it. So you don't need to be using
Right.
it. So it's possession of it.
Here's the subtle nuance of your arguments, of your answers to this gentleman. You, Mr. Passmore, referred to the victims. These victims are criminals. You take drugs, you're a criminal. And yet we don't criminalise the use of drugs in society. There is an opportunity to criminalise the use of drugs, because if you do, there won't be drug dealers, because you won't have people taking the drugs. And here's an example. If I get in my car, if I go out now, drink half a bottle of whiskey, get behind the wheel of the car and drive, you will nail me, and quite rightly, for being a drunk driver. I'm not a victim, I am a criminal. So why, when someone smokes cannabis or takes heroin or ecstasy, do we as this society put our arms around them and treat them as victims? They're criminals. And if the police started nailing them and prosecuting them and the society jails them, the drug dealers will go as well. So that is my point to this gentleman's very valid issue. But my follow-up to him is stop treating these drug takers as victims. They are not, they are criminals. Thank you.
Okay. I think just to start off with, possession and therefore taking of drugs is an offence, and it will be dealt with appropriately.
Is it though, or do you just let them off?
Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story, okay? When I was an inspector, I was working in Harlow, and we had a big undercover operation that had run for 4 months, okay? Now, we got police officers in from all round the county of Essex to go and do the arrests. And you had 2 police officers that had arrested one of our suspects. Now that suspect had been dealing drugs, but he was incredibly low level in terms of dealing drugs. He was a user. He was addicted to heroin. He had therefore started supplying heroin to feed his habit. And he had quite rightly gone through our process, had dealt drugs to undercover officers. And the PC was unknown to him, and the drug dealer said to him, "I don't know you, where are you from?" He said, I'm from Harwich." So the drug dealer then said to him, "Oh, that's really funny, I know a bloke, we'll call him Bert. I know a bloke called Bert from Harwich. He only went and sold drugs to an undercover police officer." Now 2 minutes later, that same person found out that he'd been selling drugs to an undercover police officer for 3 months. Not so stupid, you'd think. If I was to tell you then that 3 years later, having been released on parole from a long prison sentence for selling drugs, drug user but selling drugs, he was again embroiled in an undercover operation to sell drugs. He again got a lengthy prison sentence. When he was released, he was again caught selling drugs to an undercover police officer. The point I want to make there is, I think it's really easy that you, I, people in this room, try and contextualise or put an individual into a context where we sit there and say to them, you are actually in full control of all of your facets and you're able to actually make a rational choice. Now, there are options that we deal with, and we've got a fantastic integrated offender management system which is proven to reduce the amount of crime that individuals are committing. One of their pathways, and we call it pathways out, yeah, so they're people that have been through the system, is to get drugs rehabilitation and to get employment, and it's a rounded picture, okay? My point is this, and it's a long story, but my point is this. We could have carried on with all the people that we have dealing drugs for all that time. They can go into prison, they can cost us a fortune, because somebody in prison costs us a fortune. Or we can deal with people through our integrated offender management system, which costs far less, still costs us money, but costs far less, and we can deal with the root cause of what it is. But I finish this off by saying, possession and taking of drugs is an offence, and we will deal with it appropriately. There are rules in relation to how we deal with cannabis. There are rules in relation to how we deal with drugs which are more powerful as well. But if people are in possession of it, they will be dealt with, and they'll be dealt with appropriately.
I'd just like to add to that. In a utopian situation, I'd entirely agree with you. But I think one of the other things I can certainly comment on your behalf as the public, which the police cannot do, it would appear in that case that Gareth has just mentioned, clearly the prison sentence wasn't a suitable deterrent. So we need to look at taking assets, all sorts of other things, but without prolonging the conversation. The other thing is I spend on your behalf a lot of public money on dealing with addiction and getting people cleaned up. One of the things I would like to see happen with the review of community safety is making sure we go back to the days when at schools and further education institutions you're actually working with youngsters to really point out the problems that can be caused through addiction. So I don't know why we jettisoned that a few years ago. It's not going to be a utopian solution, but it will help. We should never have got rid of that, and I think it's about time we put it back again.
I defer to this gentleman here who had a point to make, but very quickly on that you've got lowlifes in the world who will never be sorted, will always be a problem, absolutely. But there are drug takers. Drug taking in this society has become more socially acceptable. People actually go on television and they kind of brag that when they were at college they took. I don't understand why it's not criminalised, and it's not the police's problem. I think it's the politicians that have created this. But if you take some drug users, anecdotally I'll admit, I don't have evidence, but anecdotally, college students. So if we started prosecuted a few, for example, and saying, yeah kids, off you go, get yourself a criminal record when you're 18 at college, you think it's cool, now go out and find a job. You will cut off some of the demand. I know it might be a bit, it might be a bit naive to suggest this, but what I think is that, maybe it's not a Suffolk problem, that I just see in this society there is this kind of social acceptance of drug taking, and I think therein lies the problem. If you criminalise drug taking and you say to them, yeah, you're going to get you're going to get a record, now go and get a job. Same as if you criminalise the use of a prostitute. It's always, you nail the prostitute for soliciting.
I say with great respect to you, the officer here, and Tim has given us a detailed account, and I'm sure that they can deal with that situation and crime situation better than a layman like you or I.
Anyway, it's very useful.
Right. Yeah, just on that, sir, I didn't challenge the point you made, so I appreciate the fact that you challenged mine. Thank you very much for that. Carry on. This gentleman here has a question.
Quick point. You said that you arrested that bloke 3 times. Is that correct?
I didn't. I arrested him. I got arrested the first time.
Is that correct? And went to prison for 3 times. Don't you think you treated him too well in prison? If you treated him not so good, he wouldn't have went back a third time.
Not a police problem, but good point.
Okay, yeah, well, we can totally take that forward, and that's the sort of thing I can comment on. The police can't, they don't set the sentencing. All they can do is bring a prosecution, and that's something I can act on in the public interest if sentencing is too lenient. But I will certainly take that forward when we have examples of that.
Well,
okay.
Can I just mention evidence-based policing, just very briefly, because it comes to the heart of what you're saying. As an organisation, with less money, we've got to find out exactly what
I
works.
understand where you're coming from.
It's just, in terms, if I could just explain this one, because within medicine, for years and years and years, they just threw drugs at everything and didn't know what worked and didn't know how it worked. With policing now, we've taken on from medicine exactly what it is that they use as a theory and to test theories and test hypotheses around what works. So in relation to drug misuse, in relation to prostitution, in relation to violence, whatever it is that we're talking about, Tim, myself, are involved in a partnership with academia which actually proves what works, not what we think works. So to come to your point, we do make sure that it's what works as opposed to what doesn't work.
Thank you. The lady here.
Yes. I think what is particularly worrying around here is the number of teenagers who take drugs. Particularly around here, they come down, you've got skateboard park, you've got woodland, which they can disappear into. And I know, and I've heard from people who've seen it, groups have congregated down here, having a chat, car comes up, they all gather around the car, goes off and they all disappear. He's not there just for the chat. And certainly they have found needles around here. So it's not just dope.
That's one of the reasons I mentioned earlier about better engagement with schools and youngsters. I mean, I used to run the Scout group here for 25 years, giving youngsters purposes in life, a real, well, all sorts of a range of activities with great support of the police cadets. We're rolling that programme out across the county. We have to do things for that. And you know, in the end, the way youngsters are brought up, a lot of the responsibility lies with parents. I know it's not easy, I'm the dad of three, well, they're young men now and so on, but nevertheless, that is every parent's worst nightmare, this drugs business. You're never going to be 100% successful, but as a society, we need to take more ownership and responsibility. I certainly think deterrence should be much stiffer, penalties should be much stiffer. We do need to make examples of people, particularly the ringleaders of organised crime behind all this. But we do sadly spend a vast amount of public money on getting people cleaned up. And when I'm talking about cleaned up, rather like Gareth said, it's not a question of getting them off heroin and sticking on methadone. It's how do you get them completely cleaned up and into full-time gainful employment so they don't need to be involved.
Should be how you prevent them getting hooked in the first place.
Well, I know, but we can't, yeah, but the point about it is, what is it that causes people to do that? We have to do more. We all have a responsibility in society to confront these issues, and it is really, really important. And I think there is no one silver bullet. It's a range of things to do, but believe you me, it is a top priority, as we said. Dealing with the drug culture is so, so important. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, if you have got evidence, please let the constabulary know. If you don't get a satisfactory answer, my contact card's on the table. Take one, give the office a call, or give me a ring, because we are not going to leave it and ignore it. I will not put up with that. It is so important that we deal with it. So can we move on to something else? So.
My name's Claude Brown. I'm the neighbourhood watch for Thorndon, and I've covered 5 villages around Thorndon area. I've been doing neighbourhood watch for over 18 years now, and I've done several talks in various areas, St Edmundsbury and Forest Heath, and also I've been on Radio Suffolk 3 times. My theme has always been that due to the cutbacks in the police funding, it's now more important than ever that we become your eyes and ears, and in fact you mentioned it earlier this evening. My question is, why do Suffolk Police, supported by the Norfolk Police, spend hundreds of man-hours every Saturday protecting the Waverley Harrier Hunt from hunt monitors who are in fact the eyes and ears of the police? On one occasion I've witnessed 5 monitors in 2 cars, which was attended by 9 police officers in 4 cars. I witnessed and filmed 3 young monitors in 1 car surrounded by 7 police officers in 3 cars. 1 officer was filming the event, and the reason they were stopped was for a defective stoplight. The sergeant in charge said that the policing was appropriate and proportionate. This left one car with 2 officers in it monitoring the hunt. On another occasion, I witnessed 6 police cars cruising around all day. Can you tell me, was that appropriate and was it proportionate?
Right. Just before Gareth answers that, that's operational, definitely Gareth's realm there. As regards fox hunting, it is a legal activity, and I have no problem with that. It's part of the rural way of life, in my opinion. The other thing though, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for all you do in Neighbourhood Watch, and it is so important as we move forward with all the pressure on budgets that we can get people like yourselves and other volunteers, as I mentioned at the beginning, to do more. So we're definitely there to support you. As a PCC, we do put money in to support Neighbourhood Watch, and I'm a huge fan of all that you do. So Gareth, what about this operation? It does seem to be a bit top heavy, to say the least.
It's a bit tricky for me to answer without knowing the exact date and without going back to the officers to discuss it, but I'll give you my view, because in relation to the organisation, do we have a resource on that we're able to draw upon to deal with any aspects of threat or harm that would appear in relation to a hunt? And the answer is yes, we do. Quite rightly, we have them on a Saturday. If you then ask me, as the duty chief officer, have I spoken with people and they've said that they have been deployed? Yes, I have. I've spoken to them, they've said that it had to be deployed because there was an issue around monitors or protesters, because you've got, obviously, you've got the 2 aspects of it in terms of where they are. Sorry?
Hunt supporters as well as monitors.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the ones you were talking about were people sitting in a car. But you're quite right. It's all aspects of the issue that's there. So they have been deployed, and yes, I've spoken to them when they have been deployed. Have I also run, and they've told me that they are able to deploy the resource, which is red circles, to deal with any issues? There haven't been any issues, and they are off dealing with something somewhere else. Yes, they have as well. So it's not, personally speaking, unless there is a problem that needs a police response, be that through the hunt monitors, protesters, hunt supporters, whichever person is involved within there, unless there is a problem, I would not want to see my staff at the area within a hunt, because I would want to have my staff dealing with other issues. Quite simply, if there is not a problem, and if either the monitors have put a call in to say there's a problem, or the hunt supporters have put a call in to say there is a problem, I would want to respond. But if there isn't a problem identified to us, quite simply, why would we?
In this particular incident, I saw a chap on a quad bike from the hunt who was committing an offence on the highway. I spoke to a police officer at that particular day, said, have you checked these details? His reply was, no, I've been too busy. Yet I go 400 yards down the road to find 7 police officers round 1 young lady and 2 men. Now, these cars are cruising. When I asked one officer how many cars out in the day, he said 4. I said, well, why have I actually counted 6? And they're cruising around all day.
I think the first aspect is when we police any incident, and that includes hunts, we do it without fear or favour. We make sure that we address the issues irrespective of who it is that we're dealing with. So if there are suggested offences being committed by the hunt, or there are suggested offences being committed by the monitors, we deal with it, and we deal with it appropriately. Like I say, I can't answer your specific one because I'd have to go away and do some more details, but I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah, I would love to come and have a chat with you about it, because some of the officers do not understand the law. For example, riding quad bike down the footpath or right of way is in contravention of the Highway Code section 156, 157, 158, and yet they do nothing about actually stopping that particular action. An officer from Suffolk said to me, more or less, shut up, there is nothing wrong with the quad bike. Yet when I insisted, a sergeant from the Wyndham police station, he in fact said there had been an offence. When I tried to speak to one of your sergeants in Suffolk, he wound the window up on the car and drove off.
Now,
Have
you written in about this one?
Well, I have.
Or somebody has.
But I'm also waiting, I've been writing to Norfolk as well, and in fact, they're not even replying.
In which case, if you see me afterwards, because it does ring a bell, if you see me afterwards, I'll make sure that I take your details and I'll get back to you with an update in relation
Thank
to
you very
it.
much.
But the general principle is, just to reinforce it, If we don't need staff there, I don't want the staff there. That's the one thing. The second thing is, if offences are being committed, it doesn't matter by whom, you deal with it appropriately.
Just one brief thing I can say there is on the Mid Suffolk websites for the North and the Central. We had a meeting in Thornton on the 27th of April, setting a priority. But if you look on the website for the North today, it said no priorities were set.
Do you know about that, Tris?
They were certainly sent through. They just we have to send them through to our comms team, and they should update the website. I apologise, Claude.
And also, as we discussed at the meeting, Sergeant John Eves has left the area. Meet the team, he's still on there, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I'll look into that. I do apologise.
Okay.
Right, thank you very much for that. Just while we wait for the next question, do feel free, if you've got any comments you want to write in, as I say, take the cards, you can email in or write in, and we will definitely follow it up. Who's next? The lady here.
Can I just follow on about hunting issues? I was
Hunting,
wondering about it. But I've been a hunter and monitor for 14 years now, and I give up my spare time every single Saturday to monitor what the hunts are doing in this area. Obviously, hunting was made illegal, and that I think is a fact that the police seem difficult to grasp. It is illegal. Since the 25th of October 2014, something seems to have changed for policing to do with the hunts. I've had many occasions where I've called out the police and I don't get any assistance at all, and that could be things like, abuse, physical. I've been ridden at, driven at, we've had car windscreens broken, all sorts. And since the 25th of October, we now have at least 4 police vehicles out every Saturday, driving round, at least, and I've got records of that. I can give you the registration numbers if you like, for most of those weeks. And sometimes we have as many as 7 vehicles driving around. And I just want to know what's changed as of the 25th of October, and do you feel able to justify that?
That again is operational, but I can certainly assure you I haven't even discussed the way the hunt is policed. I'm not sure you're quite right to say that hunting in itself per se is necessarily all the hunting activity. I'm not an expert on all this. But Gareth, has there been a change, or what's been going on?
As with you, Tim, nothing's changed as far as I know. And we do have these conversations on a weekly basis. What I can do, there's a couple of issues that you raise. First of all, I just want to make it absolutely clear. I think Suffolk were the first constabulary to actually put a prosecution file through to the Crown Prosecution Service around hunting back when it was first brought in some years ago. If you were to speak to Mark in relation to prosecutions, he will say that where there is evidence, then we will progress it as we would do with any other.
Is that hunting or hare coursing?
That was hunting. So hare coursing, Hunting Act. So the Hunting Act covers, as you know, a broad range of activity, and hare coursing has been prosecuted under the Hunting Act as well, and that is what you would call, I guess, not people that have been part of an established hunt, but people that have come in, and to be frank, members of organised crime groups as well that have come in, where there's substantial amounts of money that are bet upon various aspects, but we know that they've caused a massive issue to the farming community within Suffolk, and the number of hare coursing incidents have fallen dramatically since we've actually undertaken that operation. But in answer to your question, I mean, you raise the same issues as Claude there, which is around resource, and I absolutely stand by what I said. I do not want people at the hunt that are there other than for if there's a complaint made by the hunt supporters or the hunt monitors or people that are protesting as well. Because at the end of the day, our role within that is to make sure, as you know, that we allow peaceful protest and that we deal with any incidents that are raised forward to us. But I will take this back now because the pair of you have raised it, and I'll speak to David Skevington, who's the Assistant Chief Constable that has day-to-day control over it, and I will discuss with him your concerns around your view that it changed from last October.
I have, in fact, said to both Suffolk and Norfolk, I'm quite prepared to act as a liaison between the monitors and the police, because I can see it from the middle grounds. In fact, I haven't taken me up on it.
Well, yeah, I'll take it forward for you.
Yeah.
If you can give us your details afterwards, we'll,
Yeah. Thank you very much for raising that.
Okay, but just seems to be something that's changed, and you know, I don't think it's fair on the taxpayers and something that poor police
I can't
people
understand.
drive around
Yeah.
for hours on end. You know,
We'll take that away and have a look,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Liz is next, then Chris.
Thank you, Tim. We in the villages are your eyes and ears, quite obviously, and that's part of why we're here tonight. But I would be a lot happier if when we brought something to your attention, I know that you're very short-staffed, but if we have something specific, particularly, I think, you know, my issues are like other people are speeding through villages. We can tell you when the speeding occurs, where it occurs. With your small amount of resources, if you could monitor the speeding through the villages, we would start catching people. Now, on several occasions through my village, I have darn nearly lost my life through people coming up through my village at over 60 miles an hour. I mean, you can hear them coming, you can feel the ground reverberating. I'm walking 3 dogs, and there's times I've had to jump into the ditch. I know what the time is. They're going to work or they're coming back. Very eyes and ears. If you listen to us, we can tell you where to use those very scarce resources. I'm not alone. I'm sure I'm not alone, because I know that every time that priorities are set, speeding through the village is the big one. I know that it's expensive to put up signs and so forth, but we've got to do something. People are going to lose their lives. And it's not fair to the people who live in the villages to have to live with this horrendous speeding. It's not just cars and so forth too. Some of the big tractors coming through the village are doing horrendous speed, and they'll never stop. It's like trying to stop a tanker, trying to stop one of these big tractors with a trailer on the back. So if you could listen to us, if we give you the information, on 1 or 2 occasions, if you could monitor it, perhaps we could start catching people that are causing the problem.
Tristan, you want to comment, then I'll just tell you with some of the way speaking.
So we spoke about that before.
Yes, I think we have, yeah. As I said in my little input earlier, there's an insatiable appetite for speed enforcement that we cannot feed, unfortunately, much as we'd love to be out there. There's a number of issues as well. Sometimes locations are just not suitable for us to do enforcement because of health and safety and the danger issues. I see you shaking your head, but that's a fact, I'm afraid. We can put down devices on the road that obviously check the speed and give us some data to work from, and then if that data indicates there is a major problem, then we can look to deploy either the speed safety cameraman or officers or alternative means. It is my sort of stock answer, I guess, but what we encourage in the first instance is for the community to do something about it themselves and form a community speed watch. Now that can be either on a village by village basis, or a collective of villages can form their own scheme involving people from various locations. They can come together. They don't then have to perhaps enforce on their own doorstep and deal with the perhaps confrontation that they may cause them some concern. But you know, this community speed watch, there's a very active scheme here in and we've got a number of other schemes, and they provide us the data, and we will act on it where we can. But we're against the backdrop of falling resources. As I said earlier as well, we can only speed enforce for a very short time in any given area before everybody's telling everybody else, either via their smartphones or via just flashing lights and that sort of thing. So it's difficult, but if you've got specific locations, then feed them into the Safer Neighbourhood team. The contact details are on the website, and they can take a look at it, and obviously they have to prioritise.
Some of the arguments are, you've just talked about health and safety, but some of the arguments, certainly in our villages, no, we can't send out a police because there's no footpath. Well, in our village doesn't have any footpaths anyway, or there's no lights in the winter. But that's where people are, and that's where people are in danger. Surely you need to protect us in our villages. I really try. I know there's a health and safety issue, but there's also a health and safety issue for the people that are being in danger.
I agree. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
But and please don't take what Tristan said as this is health and safety gone there. Okay, it's not. One of my previous roles was to be in charge of all of roads policing amongst a number of other things as well. And sadly, there have been some officers that have been killed in relation to the duty that they perform. And my responsibility as the employer of those staff is to ensure that we don't put them in an unnecessary risk. But that's not to say there isn't a solution to trying to find it. Chris mentioned we can put out the cords that you see across the road to try and have a look to see if people are speeding and when they're speeding. And you do try and find a way around it. Now that may mean that you actually have to, put the officer 150 yards away, 200 yards away from where you think the problem is. I cannot put my staff, and wouldn't endorse putting my staff, in a position that's really dangerous. And I'll take that. If you want to have that, so it's not hurl abuse at me in relation to that. I cannot put them in a position where they are at undue risk. I can find other ways of dealing with it. That's the message that I want to put across. But we do have it, and we have other locations where we just do it a little bit further down the road. It's visibility, there's visibility of a car, it does slow people down. As we know, it's usually local people that are actually caught in the speeding when we do it. So, you mentioned tractors, it's local farmers, it's the local community, and we do need to be there to make sure it's not only those people that are going through our villages, but also those that are present within it as well. So wherever possible, there is a way of doing it. I don't know, Tim, if you want to cover the general principle of what we've agreed in relation to speed enforcement, because you did a big survey last year in relation to speed enforcement.
Yeah, no, and the pattern has changed, and yes, we can always bang on about resources and all this, but the reality is, it is a priority. The mode of enforcement has changed. There are 423 parishes in Suffolk, for those interested in things like that. So we do need to get round. Occasionally something slips through the net. If you feel you haven't been treated fairly, let me know straight away. We had this in Charlesfield. It had been missed off the rotor. It shouldn't have been. That has now been put right. So we're there to support you and do that. And the other thing I'd like to say is that speeding survey had over 2,000 responses, and it has made a fundamental difference. There is still more to do. I fully accept that. We put a lot of money into the awareness courses, and the surplus money from that is ring-fenced to make sure that it goes back to invest in improving road safety. I am losing the will to live, ladies and gentlemen, with people at the County Council fiddling about. There is £200,000 sitting there ready to put into improved road safety schemes. If I don't get a sensible answer by the end of the month, I'm going to overrule it and we'll just get on with it. Because it's about time, as someone said, politicians got off their backside and sorted a few things out. That is for mobile signs, supporting community speed watch, a variety of methods just to raise awareness. And I have to say, sometimes when you get some maniac who hooms down the A140 at whatever speed it is, and I'm not talking about a pursuit car, I do begin to wonder whether some of the judiciary have left their sentence behind, because the sentencing, if someone's doing over 100 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour speed limit, should be much more than 4 or 5 months ban. It isn't good enough. It sends completely the wrong signal, and I should be raising that with the Criminal Justice Board and telling them I expect them to get something sensible done about this. But thanks for raising it. I knew it would come up, and it is an issue. No, and it is. And it's, we have to find, as Gareth says, where there's a will, there's a way, and we jolly well need to find solutions to it. So we are definitely on the case. I think the lady was there, then I'll come to Chris and then David.
As you've mentioned, we have a speed watch going on. I'm a member of that. Right. I just wondered, 20 is plenty. We've been planning, campaigning for this for ages. Nothing's happened. What can you tell me where we are with that?
Yep, that's again, I'll point the finger at the County Council. The Highways Authority, the branch of the County Council, they're the ones who have to decide this. They will listen. I think the one statutory constantly on this is the constabulary, and I know in certain locations they are supportive of it. So I suggest you get onto your county councils. I'll certainly back you up in doing that as well. Where there are areas where a 20 limit is appropriate, that's fine, but we also need to remember if we're going to do that, it also has to have the ability to have it enforced as well. In my district council patch in Cobham, they've got a 20 limit that is enforceable. So it can be done, and we need to look at it. But you need the evidence to support it. The county council did say they were going to have some route-based strategies for all the A and B roads, but of course that applies just exactly right, the 1077 coming through the middle of I. So I'll take that forward.
I actually have a question for Guy McGregor last night, but it wasn't a very satisfactory answer.
Right. Sorry, no, I won't say that. No. Well, no, I can take that forward, seriously. I will do that. I'll make a note of it and we'll see what we can do. All right? And if you give me your details, I'll make sure we get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think Chris was next, and then David.
Sorry.
And then the gentleman, Mr. Goodrum at the back. Christopher.
I'm Christopher Salt from the Federation of Small Businesses. I'd like you to just go. People have been bringing up lots and lots of different issues that are all about this. So, you know, we know that people have different views, and you've got to deal with a great panoply of issues. The great movement that we've had that actually started to create success in Suffolk was when we started to get community policing. That's when the communities were actually protected from within the community. Now, you're facing cuts, considerable cuts. There have already been cuts in community policing. I know that when the Federation did a survey of the villages in Hoxton, it was pointed out that in their view, and some of the other people, businesses we talked to, it was cut back as far as it could be from what it was when it was at its most successful. I've noticed in mine, for example, a lack or far fewer views of police around on the street than there used to be when the process first started. Now you're going into a cut process. Businesses and communities start to defend themselves, start to stand up for things when they know the police is in the community to back them up. If you're not there, then they're not in a position to actually stand up for what they consider to be right and to take things to. It's not just a matter of talking to you or getting information to you, it's you being there in amongst the community.
I've got a couple of comments.
Community policing is going to be at the heart of a new model that we have within Suffolk Police. And nothing will change in relation to that. It may look very different. And the reason I say that is because of what I said on my slide. So if you have a look at what I said on my slide, that bottom point about us working as a joined up public service. If we have a team which delivers a joined up public service amongst the county, district councils, health, then it will be a better service that we do provide. But community policing will be at the heart of what we do. That's the first point I just want to make. The second point is, in relation to how we're doing the change model, we have left until the very end our emergency response capability. The reason we've done that is because we want to reduce demand, we want to make sure that we don't have to respond to as many emergency calls. If our reduction of demand works, then we don't have to respond to that number of calls. But we want to make sure it works before we actually then start to reduce the number of people doing emergency response. But you will always get an emergency response, and we've shown with the figures that we produce, we respond to those in terms of our targets and our target times. The third point, which I think is really important, is that we now have to look at the service we provide in a completely different way. And you'll recall I talked about what we describe as the traditional crime, that we still have to respond to, but which is less in the British Crime Survey and local surveys as well. And we need to be able to deal with those crimes that are committed hidden from us in terms of perhaps child sexual exploitation, perhaps online abuse, online fraud, and we usually do at this stage, we usually say how many people have they attempted to try and take money out of your accounts online versus how many people have had a face-to-face interaction with somebody committing a crime. And it's much, much, much higher wherever you do it. That's not to say that we're not going to still be there to deal with the traditional crimes. We've got to be able to deal with it, which is just a different setup and different construct.
Just on the issue of the Safer Neighbourhood Team concept, that is there to stay. If you like, that is welded onto a breastplate. That local county policing is really, really important. The other thing that needs to happen is if you look at the way police time is actually spent, and that's why evidence-based policing has been started, it beggars belief that on occasions over a third of police time is spent on dealing with mental health issues. If you then enter that, as I said at the beginning, of the safeguarding issues and social services, the rest of the public sector's got to step up to the mark. My personal view is, if you go back to the original concept of the Safer Neighbourhood team, it wasn't just about policing. It was about identity of place, the community, and pooling resources to make that community itself safer. So you don't need people going around giving independent advice on, for example, fire prevention, on business security, on home security, cyber security, trading standards, first aid, missing people. We need to start pooling resources so you get single practitioners doing some of these things, and then you can draw in specialist help as and when it's required. Now, that's not going to solve the whole problem, but it will cut out duplication. It seems eminently sensible to me to do that. I think we should be looking very seriously at combining blue light services and so on. The operational, I suppose, range of what has to be done is also changing. And we do need public opinion to get behind something like that, to get politicians to wake up and do it, and rather than just talk about it.
So how's your specials initiative going?
That, funnily enough, I had a briefing on that this afternoon. We have suffered a downturn in the number of specials, largely because we're not recruiting, and some of them want to join full-time, and they've gone off to other constabularies, but the numbers are now picking up quite strongly. In order to recognise that, Chris, we've put money into making sure there's a full-time coordinator supported by 2 part-time people. That hasn't happened for ages, and the numbers are now starting to pick up. We'll be launching a new initiative at the Suffolk show. We've just got a new, up at the Broads, I was going to say launched, it was in a boat and so on. We're getting more people looking at cybercrime over in Haverhill. There's another lot that are doing warrants. There are those helping with traffic policing. We've got 2 rural crime specialist teams from specials. There's another one coming up very soon in the west of the county. I am a huge fan of these wonderful people who volunteers, and we're putting resources into it to make sure that it happens. It's not a substitute for policing, but is an example of communities helping themselves. They have the same powers, of course, as full-time constables, and it's really, really important we get behind them. So that is something that is helping to pull it back the other way. And volunteering is important. I've mentioned Neighbourhood Watch and so on. All these other activities have a huge role to play. And that's the way forward I think we're going to have to move to. And that is something that Suffolk is particularly good at. So we need to build on that. And certainly you will not find me lacking in support for these initiatives. It's a hell of a job. I'm not trying to gloss over it, but I am optimistic that together we can come through all this. Thank you. Yeah, David was actually next, to be fair.
Okay, I was just going to ask about S&Ts as we were talking about.
Okay, all right.
That's
You don't
right.
mind, go ahead.
As you know, I come from the wild west of Haverhill. Up until recently, we did a very successful S&T live broadcasting over the internet and everything, which was abandoned 2 months ago, apparently at the instigation of senior staff. I don't know who that was. And now the priorities, and it was interesting to hear earlier on about the Mid-Suffolk priorities, the priorities are now set by the police, not by the public anymore. And we had a very good scheme going. We had 50 or 60 people attend the meetings, probably 30 or 40 online. We voted on it and everything else. And I'm surprised, I was told that the concept of public S&T priorities had been abandoned throughout the whole of Suffolk.
It's complete news to me. I wish you'd let me know, because that's not acceptable.
Sorry,
Or jolly well changed.
For the unknowledgeable, what is an SNT?
Safer Neighbourhood team. I do apologise. Yeah, it's the local area that there's several, I don't know, what is it, 31 in Suffolk, something like that. Divide the county up into areas. And then Gareth, this is quite a serious issue actually, because I don't know who's...
Safer Neighbourhood teams are there to serve the public.
Well, not Safer Neighbourhood, get rid of Safer Neighbourhood team.
No, it's priority setting.
And I think the second point that I'd like to make is in terms of technology, we are at the moment in the process of procuring a new website which will enable us to do much more. It might be a technical issue, it certainly hasn't been raised to the chief officer level, so it may be a technical issue. But
No. It was done by me, free of charge to the constabulary, and it's nothing to do with the broadcast per se, but the whole concept of the fact that priorities tend to be very low-level things.
Right.
It was decided that the more important things, which are very valid, drones, whatever, should take much more priority rather than parking in the high street.
Yeah, and I just wonder, and I'll have to take away to have a look at it. I just wonder if there's been some discussion around the concept of threat, harm, and risk, which I mentioned, But even still, we're still here. We still need to listen to the public, find out from the public what the issues are, and see how it is that we address them. Albeit, I think it's a two-way thing. So actually, we'll sit down and say, this is what we found out about this area, and these are the threats that we're facing. It's okay us people to come and sit in this meeting hall tonight and talk about what the issues are, but actually, you also need to know that we're dealing with 30 cases of child sexual exploitation within the region. We also need to let you know that we're dealing with X, we're dealing with Y, just so it's a more informed debate. So I would encourage a more informed debate, but the fact that you say that we're not listening to local people really concerns me, and it's something I can take away and have a look at.
Tim, have you ring-fenced money for the safe and neighbourhood team?
We ring-fence money for the county policing command. That's why the safe and neighbourhood team concept will be staying. So it will not be about that. So you don't need to worry about that.
You've got my absolute assurance, because Tim holds me to account for delivery of police service. What we have in place is and this is sort of the boring technical issues, I guess, but it's just a safeguard, is that Tim has members of his staff that sit on my change board, the meeting that deals with all the change. When we present what that change will look like, we'll sit down and go through what the changes are, what the risks are that are presented, and what the opportunities are that are presented from it as well. So when you have a look at all of that, there are representatives that sit on it, and then we present the business case to Tim, for Tim to have a look at and comment upon as well. So there is, Tim has a really active oversight in relation to everything that we're doing.
Thanks for raising it. David.
Thank you. Given the strain on your resources, do you think that the PCSOs have been given enough authority? It just occurs to me that admittedly they will be trained to a particular level, a little bit more training in a few more areas might well increase your capacity. I'm thinking this in particular, this issue of speeding through villages, which is all the parish council meetings that I attend, it's the principal issue. And it doesn't seem to be handled as well as we think it should be. The PCSOs, I know, attend and monitor speeding through villages, but they cannot act on what they see. Would it be possible to train them up a little bit more so that they can act on what they see and make it a bit more effective?
There's a distinct difference between a police officer and a PCSO, and that that difference needs to be there. They were brought in for a specific reason. They were brought in there to work and problem solve with the community, and police officers, as you know, have the warranted powers. That said, we have reviewed recently the roles that PCSOs perform, and we've given them what we believe is the maximum authority allowed under the national guidance, and that has allowed them to, I'll get this right, to detain people, whereas previously within Suffolk we didn't have the rights, they didn't have the rights to detain people, as an example. So have we gone through it, reviewed it and thought, actually, are we happy with where PCSOs sit with their powers now or not? Should we review it or not? And the answer is we have reviewed it and we've put through the changes that are there. But that said, they are not police officers and never will do. Otherwise you'll not have the same relationship that they have with the communities that they do serve.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin.
I think I got it right, Chief Constable. Is that correct, your title?
Yeah, I'm temporarily the Chief Constable.
When you made your opening speech, you said when the officers made arrests, that go back and have a look what the crime is. Is that true or false?
No, I think that's probably when we're talking about mobile computer working. What I said is when officers attend an incident, they'll go to the incident and take the details, but they'll have to return to the police station to put it on the computer. It isn't just when they make arrests or anything like that. So there are instances where they're dragged back to the police
station.
That
is to the same point. You have to excuse me because I'm not the best educated person in the world. In 2013, I got a hold of a man's toy who owed me 30,000. I simply come home and phoned the police and told them what I'd done. I got home about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. About 8:30 that evening, firearms officers arrived at my farm and 2 police officers arrested me. I walked in the van unaided and I finished up in Bury Hospital. The officers, when they put their report in, put a report in to suit how they'd treated me. I am still under the doctor now. I've visited him today and he told me I'll have my injuries while I'm alive. I have tried to speak to the police, I've written to them, they refuse to speak to me or answer any of my questions. I want to know why I was treated in that manner.
Okay, I can't answer you tonight because I don't know the circumstances. What I do know is that there is a process by which people can make a complaint if they feel that they have not been treated appropriately.
They didn't register my treatment. I made a complaint how they left her. She was in a wheelchair, couldn't get to the toilet, couldn't have nothing to eat. They wouldn't let me make arrangements to someone to look after her when I was arrested. And I finished in where I thought I was going to die. I went to Ipswich Crown Court a few weeks ago and the gun officer lied under oath. That should never take place. And your officer what arrested me didn't tell the truth. They, on their report, didn't say nothing, the truth what happened. They put in what they wanted so they covered their ground.
Now, you are making some very serious allegations against police officers.
I don't have to tell a lie.
No, I'm not saying you are.
Accurate.
I'm not saying you are. What I am saying is the most appropriate way for me to deal with this will be to take your details, and I'll personally have oversight, and I know Tim will as well, that we can take it back, we can ask our professional standards department what they're currently doing about it and how they're progressing it. So if we speak afterwards, I can take your details. But to be frank, if I don't know the circumstances, I can't answer you.
I accept the police have a very difficult job to do. I accept that.
But with respect, this is not the place for this. You had an opportunity. The officer said that he'd see you afterward. It's nothing for us as a group of people.
We will get all the details and we're definitely not going to assure you will come back. And if you haven't been treated right well, obviously we're extremely apologetic about that. But thank you for raising it. Now, with the question here, the gentleman with the black currant flavour.
That's you. Thank you. That's a very graphic description. I really wanted to follow on, not on speeding, but on the question of being eyes and ears, perhaps, and so forth. And it really fits into a lot of what's being said. It's my view, and I don't know if others will agree with me, that one of the most reassuring things that police can do is actually give you that peace of mind that when you need them, you pick the phone up, and within a short time, depending on the location, you'll have 1 or 2 highly trained personal officers there who deal with your problem. I think that's more reassuring than perhaps seeing a high-vis jacket walking around, but that's my personal view. My experience of Suffolk Police in the 3 years I've lived in the county has been, on a few encounters I've had, has been very good once I've actually managed to have an interaction with officers. I found the officers very polite, very professional, capable, but getting them to come is getting more and more difficult, it seems. And, you know, I wanted to try and be a bit sort of strategic and a bit sort of non-detailed, but clearly that's not quite how the meeting goes. So I'll give the short example. I too live in Thorndon, and the Mid-Suffolk Council had a did a very good piece of work recently in cleaning up the green at Stanwell Green, with grass triangle, with granite slabs and posts and things. And I hoped that it would stop people who were visiting the adjacent bowls club from parking on the green and destroying it. My confidence was misplaced, and there was a vehicle that ran over the plants, chewed up the grass 2 nights ago. And I phoned the control room on 101, because it wasn't a 999, and was told that it wasn't something that they would respond to. So I pointed out that, you know, it's a dangerous position because it obstructs the view for people using the junction. There's an allegation of criminal damage on the plants in the path, because the grass, because somebody's got to do that. There's a suspect nearby. I've got the registration number and a photograph of the vehicle sitting there, and I'm told by the lady in the control room that you would not deploy. So I said, okay, if you're not going to deploy, I'll go down there and speak to her myself. So I did. I was abused by the people there. You know, unfortunately, even with my advancing years, I'm probably okay in the bowls club, I didn't fear for my safety, but nonetheless, something that's been done to beautify and make our village better has started being ruined again, and I've got no help at all. So I used Twitter to Mid Suffolk Police and said, why do you not turn out to a criminal damage with a suspect nearby? And I got what I think the modern term is a passive-aggressive response, saying, well, I suggest you phone the sergeant, he might explain it to you. Maybe it's very difficult to convey intonation in 140 characters, but that was my reading of it. If we're to be the eyes and ears, you have to listen to what we're saying and respond when we call for you.
Okay, thanks for the question. Tristan?
Yes, thank you, sir. We did, we did obviously look into the specifics because you, as you say, you took to Twitter, and that's quite reasonable. I haven't read the event in detail, so I haven't actually been in my office for a couple of days, but my understanding is we did deploy an officer to the area, but possibly not to come and see you.
Well, you didn't take my name.
Okay.
So that would be difficult, wouldn't it?
Again, what I think the best bet is if I speak to you afterwards, and I get the details, and then I'll have a look into it, and then we can obviously talk one-to-one about it and see whether what we did was satisfactory.
I'm actually really not so concerned about the individual incident, because I went and dealt with it myself.
Yeah.
And she moved it, and I saw her drive past today, and she didn't park on it. So we seem to have succeeded. The point to me is the greater point, that we talk about eyes and ears, we talk about you being responsive, we talk about rural crime, and you can't control the rural areas, of course you can't all the time. Yet, when actually we're saying, look, something's going on that's affecting our quality of life, we have this filter that we seem to have to get through with the control room before they'll deploy. Once they deploy, the officers are brilliant.
As alluded to by the Chief Constable, we are having to look at slightly new ways of doing things, and one is with our control room, in that it does assess, I'm going to use the term again, threat, risk and harm, where we try, we're not always going to be right, and that's where, you know, we've got to put our hands up and say it's a fairly new process, and we won't always get it right. There will be occasions when we don't attend things that we should, and vice versa. So this may be one of those cases, particularly if you've gone up the road and then got a mouthful, you know, that's a public order offence possibly towards you as well. But we are having to look at creative ways, but you know, ways of reducing our demand and perhaps not sending officers to those things. In the past, we would have just routinely sent somebody without asking any questions at all. So now the idea is that we should ask some quite searching questions of the person phoning up, which might seem a bit annoying at the time, but that's what we've got to do to try and match our resources to the demand out there.
I understand. Just the last point, if you don't get the feedback, then you won't know how to adjust it.
No, that's absolutely, that's we accept that. Thank you.
That's a really good point, because people won't report if they don't get any feedback. Even if it's a day or two later, at least you feel it's been registered, and that's part of my role, to make sure that I can put the pressure on these guys to make sure you do get a response. So that's really useful to hear things like that. Did you just want to add very quickly on
Add to that?
Yeah, I know you've recorded as well.
Since the advent of 101, the new system they've got now, it seems more difficult. On the newsletters that come out from the SNTs, at the bottom of it, it says sort of, if you want to speak to your officer, ring 101 and ask to speak to him. But I've been doing this job for a long time, so 18 years. Once you mention you are actually the neighbourhood watch coordinator, if I want to speak to PCSO Mark Tucker, I would expect them to put me through, not to ask, what's it about, sir? Now, I'm paying for the phone call, and it's my time, I'm a volunteer. Why have I got to explain it to the operator, then to the police officer?
The good news is, with technology as we've got it at the moment, we are having an automated system where you can ask, you will be able to ask for exactly who it was you need to get through to, and you'll be put through to them as well. Or you can put in the extension number and you'll know, you'll know the extension number you need to be put through to. So you'll be able to have that direct access to.
Good, thank you very much indeed.
Kathy, I will come to you. Because you already have 3 or 4 bites of the chair.
Yes, it's just really partly supporting you, and I don't mean to be flippant on my second part, but Tim knows probably what I'm about to say, that he's got an idea of horseback on Angel. No, Angel's on horseback. I was the other way around, wasn't I? And that's been the eyes and ears, which is riding horses, and I've got a pack come through, and I believe we're going to sort of launch that at the Suffolk show. Admittedly, we'd only have a sort of a 5-mile radius from where we go, but that's something that the police are looking into, and I'm sort of looking to see whether I might be one of your volunteers. But my question is, have they found the pony in Devon? The wooden one that was stolen from the children's school.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Because it was a very valuable pony in the children's.
Yes. Absolutely.
But that came through on the police directives and areas. It was giving us a description with a black mane and tail and grey with spots. I really don't know.
Well, at least it wasn't me anyway.
But it's affecting the children.
Yeah. Well, we are launching, as you pointed out, just for the benefit of the broader audience. Tim's been very vocal in relation to ensuring that constabulary has a response in the rural areas, that people that go and ride their horses on a day-to-day basis, and people that want to be special constables that ride their horses as well. Through careful negotiation, we've got a slot at the Suffolk show to be able to launch that, and I know we've got a fantastic scheme with people throughout the county that belong to the Horse Watch scheme, and also, as you know, there's that enhancement as well of trying to get, I suppose, Horse Watch Plus before we then look at specials on horseback as well.
Good, thanks. Anybody get apart from our friend at the back? Can we just take the gentleman here first? And then we've got, I'm not in you out.
I've blotted my copybook.
No, you don't.
Commissioner Tim, you moved on from what you were enlarging upon under the heading of youth engagement.
Yes.
We know why you moved on, because it was set in a particular context of abuse. Is there any more you'd like to say under the heading of youth engagement before the meeting?
Certainly. No, I would. I'm a great believer that the youngsters in our society, we all know they are the future. I think the hand that's been dealt to them over the last few years with the levels of national debt, them trying to find employment, having had a decent education, buying a home, settling down, all that, it's a hell of a burden to put on them. We should never have got into this state. We have, so we have to roll our shirt sleeve up and get on with it. But there are those significant numbers who are either dispossessed, not very well off, have had hard times, and I think in a decent society we have to do what we can to support them. So the work that we put in, for example, to police cadets, we've got a coordinator now. A third of the people or youngsters in police cadets come from an underprivileged or difficult background, and it makes a big difference. I put 15,000 quid of your money, for example, in parts of Ipswich to working with the Prince's Trust. And these are really difficult individuals who probably can't even read or write, barely know how to hold a fat hand or a fork or knife. No parental role models. Very often in a chaotic, is the politically correct way of describing this, of domestic abuse, drug addiction, violence, alcohol abuse, unemployment, all of it goes together. And what I do know, very often criminal records, what I do know is that by working with the Prince's Trust and so on, these have actually been able to turn people's lives around. So instead of having a life of criminality and destitution, they have a purpose in life. It is expensive, but it does work. So that's one thing we're doing. Gareth mentioned integrated offender management. I've been to some of the case studies there. It beggars belief that people, by the time they're age of, I don't know, 25 or 30, they've 9 or 10 custodial sentences. We have to find a new way of dealing with this. You've got to have a punishment, I accept that, a sanction, but the carrot and stick approach does work with many people, not with all. Great supporter of youth groups. I didn't get the scout group here, I did. I've got a rugby refereeing for youngsters. Anything we can do in a society to give them a purpose in life is absolutely crucial. And another thing that we've done, we put a bit of money, your money, into supporting the Rotary Club who go to who take, I think 7 or 8 youngsters from Suffolk to their Youth Leadership Academy, which is held over at Grafton Water in the summer for a whole week, a bit like an outbound course. And I was quite humbled to see the transformation there is in some of these youngsters who've got no confidence, no decent background, they become fine people. So there's that. I mentioned earlier the need to engage with schools. We're going to embark on a programme of engagement with sixth form colleges and so on around Suffolk once we get them, actually starting next month, to try and explain to people what we can do to support them, and that life is difficult, we all know that, but there are opportunities. I'd like to see a lot more done on procurement. When you're using taxpayers' money, I get sick and tired of EU rules and other regulations getting in the way. I actually care about youngsters who are unemployed, and we should be using our procurement rules where we can, not about chucking money at it, to provide opportunities for youngsters to get gainful employment and training. So there's a huge amount to do. It is a really important question. You look at places not very far from here, you go to parts of Lowestoft, there are pockets of extreme deprivation, and we've got to do something like that. And the last thing I would say, when it comes to children, in the legislation in the 2014 Children's Act, every police and crime commissioner has to have due regard for safeguarding all children, in my case in Suffolk. And that's one hell of an ask, but it is something we take very seriously. So that means other agencies, if they're in care, have got to jolly well step up to the mark. And part of my role, and it is a very privileged position, is to try and hold them to account. I don't have the power to do that, but I can certainly ask the questions. And in that domestic abuse report, where you hear of some barbaric blokes who strangle a woman repeatedly till they come around 4 or 5 times, the lady was beaten up because she went round to buy a pint of milk and didn't ask permission, another one who had to perform sex acts in front of the children. What are we doing? This is in 21st century Suffolk. When you also know that if you're looking at cybercrime, you can actually pay 10 quid with your credit card to watch live streaming of sexual abuse of children. There is something pretty sick in society. Now, I'm not saying that actually happens in Suffolk, but I bet it jolly well does in certain areas. So it's a hell of a big subject, this, and we all have a responsibility. The police can't do it on their own, nor can other agencies, but as a society, we've got to do something about it. So it's a really, really important question, because we know if you don't set children out in the straight and narrow, and I know it's one pretty big ask, those that live in an environment of abuse and troubled families, whatever you like to call it, are much more likely to be the offenders of the future. And I do get a bit sick and tired of some of the politically correct comments that you hear, and we need to get a grip on this subject really, really seriously, because that is one way, longer term, you talk about reducing demand, and that is so important. And we've all got a responsibility to try and help. So thanks for asking that. It wasn't really a narrative like that. Now,
is there anyone else?
No, here we go, last hurrah. Full license.
You'll be pleased to know I'm a lot calmer now.
Good.
I should apologise earlier, but when someone refers to drug takers as victims, that is a red rag to report. So I'm a lot calmer. Yeah, I do have a point to make, but I just want to pick up on something that lady in the blue was talking about, and you about the speeding through villages. I live in Stowmarket, not sure whether I'm supposed to put this one on Bury St Edmunds, but anyway. And I've noticed on the stretch of the A14 between somewhere when I've been driving to Ipswich, you seem to have some mobile van that's got a camera at the back. I think it's a speed camera. Now, you know these things better than I do. Statistically, and statistics can lie, of course, but statistically, I think you're 3 times more likely to have an accident on a rural road than you are on a trunk road. Now, you guys, and I have a lot of sympathies with the police, the way you are measured and your effectiveness on catching criminals, and we'll come to that, which is my point, the next one. You might stick this thing on the A14, because you're going to catch more people doing over 80, and you're going to do that. But by the sound of this lady's impassioned plea to you, you wonder whether, instead of sticking that on the A14 or the A11 or the A12, put it in one of these rural villages, you may catch only a fraction of the speeders in terms of number, but the impact is multiplied accordingly. That's an observation. If you want to comment on that,
I'll not comment that now.
Then I'll talk about what I paid me for. But anyway, carry on.
Right. First of all, I do not care if I put a speed van out and not one single person gets caught speeding.
Good to know.
My whole philosophy in relation to speeding is to deal with the issues that we've discussed, and we discuss quite frequently with Tim, is already discussed how, as an organisation, we changed radically after the speeding survey that was conducted by their office. And we do target areas where there is, and we'll keep using this phrase, a threat, risk and harm, or threat, risk and harm. Because that will be on roads like the A14, it will be on roads that are rural roads, it will be on roads that are in towns. And we have a set number, and you can see them because they're all on our website, of all the places where we do deploy and why. So if you were to go and look on there, you'll see the number of crashes that have been around a particular area. Do you know, the issue isn't necessarily speeding though, because I can tell you on rural roads, predominantly, it's not speeding per se, but driving at a speed that's not conducive with the conditions that you face. So it's somebody doing 50 and a 60 that is driving in ice, that slides, goes off at a corner. That said, we still need to make sure there's enforcement there, because rural roads, you're quite right, do present their dangers. But I go back to the point that it matters not, if I put the camera around, the only thing I'll say is if I'm putting it out and not catching anybody speeding, it's probably in the wrong place. But it doesn't worry me that we don't get anybody. What worries me is seeing the impact of having those vans and the enforcement activity and the education that we do. And as you can see, that sliding graph which shows that year on year we are having a really good impact upon the level of crashes where somebody is killed and seriously injured. The A14 is somewhere where it should be deployed, and it's not put on there as a cash cow, it's put on there because actually we've had crashes there that we need to do.
Oh, thank you for that.
How can you stand there and just say what you've done? I was in a police car going 50 miles an hour in a 30 mile zone. How do you speak to that then? Police speeding in areas where they shouldn't go.
And do you know, if police cars go through speed cameras, they get something sent through to them the same as you do.
30 mile an hour, who's doing
they get something sent through to them the same as you or I would in our private life. So, you know, they are sent through and they have to justify it. And where they can't justify it, we deal with them as if we'd deal with any other member of the public.
Okay. Now you have one break.
Yes, sorry. First of all, I have the utmost respect for the police, absolutely, and I think that your job has been made harder over decades of political interference. Whether you go back to Roy Jenkins and his unit beat policing that he introduced in Kirby and then Altrincham or whatever, that has taken the policeman out of the police car, off the streets and into police cars, or whether it's the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 84 that forces you to spend so much time in what I would consider non-productive activities. But I want to pick up on, particularly on the community policing, and it's a shame that gentleman's left. I may be, because I live in an urban environment, I may be at odds with this gentleman here, talking about his response times. I've lived in Stowmarket since August, and it is no exaggeration to say I have never seen a policeman outside a car. So I'm very interested. I would have phrased a different question, but I'm going to phrase it this way. You've said that community policing is at the heart of what you're now going to do. So could you please elaborate on what community policing is, and hopefully it won't be seeing your brightly coloured cars more often, that actually you'll pull your policeman out. But please.
It's simply, really simply, and please I'm not being flippant when I give this answer, it's dealing with the problems that the community faces in the best and most appropriate way. And that's not me waffling on it, and I'll give you an example. You know, a community policing team now has to deal with a teenager that is cyberbullied. Now, how's the best way that we deal with that? Is it that you see us visibly walking down the road, or is it that we actually interact with that teenager over the internet, or do we go and visit them at their house or at their school? There are numerous police responses where you won't get a uniformed police presence, because actually it's a plainclothes police presence, or somebody simply wants to take advice. The role of the PCSO within the community team is to provide that visible interaction with the community, as well as the police officers as well. I do think there needs to be an element of visibility, quite clearly, because actually if we feel safe, it's a better community. I really get that. But there are other ways that we need to deal with crimes as well that do not necessitate either a car driving around or somebody walking up and down the street. When we come to the issues around evidence-based policing, then we are looking at how we respond to various incidents. And without going into it in too much depth, for example, for years and years and years, we've thought it's the best thing to do to place a group of police officers around all the pubs and clubs at kicking out time. Okay? Now actually, we're challenging that to say we probably don't need to be outside there all the time. We need to be there at X time and Y time. They've done a lot of work to say when we flood an area with uniform, it's actually 10 minutes that counts. You can drive off again for an hour afterwards because it has as much impact as somebody staying in there. So visibility is important, but targeted visibility.
True. The observation is that a policeman, the old time, and you poor guys, you've got so many, you've got tasers and sprays and everything else, that you are not Dixon and Dock Green anymore, and I accept that. But the old policeman who patrolled his area got to know his area. If you go back to the Brixton riots, the beat policeman identified the group of individuals who sparked off the Brixton riots in '84. They weren't from that area because he knew his area. He would know if something looked out of place. No, it's not. It's not. No, please. Okay. No. Anyway, the point is, if you have a...
If I thank the officers for coming.
I think there's
The point on the position, I say with great respect to you, I'm a member of the public like you are, but you'll hold the evening. And I really find, if you've got a question to ask, be succinct, ask the question, and then sit down.
Gareth, I'd just like to just respond to that, and then we'll draw a conclusion, and if there's anything else, we can talk afterwards. Gareth, just do that, and then we'll...
I support you in what you say, and I'm not supporting you, but let me just explain why. I still hear, time in, time out, people that Tristan supervises and manages, and people in other areas of the county where they've sat down and said, that PCSO gave us that piece of information that got that person arrested that stopped those burglaries taking place. I think it's absolutely essential that we go back to the Peelian principles that Peel brought them in, the people of the police of the people. Okay? If we don't have that interaction, we don't get that information in, then we cannot deal with it and deal with things appropriately. I think the point you're making is that there are some really good people that get into the community and understand the community. It might not happen on all occasions, which is where I think you're coming from.
Very, very briefly, Brixton Rights created 81, and that's and I was there, it wasn't the local big man, and of course, we won't go to that. The point is, you've obviously done quite a bit of research on policing. If you look at the experiment, I think it's in
Atlanta, which somebody will probably read, back in the 70s, it's something like a beat patrolling police constable will come within a quarter of a mile of a burglary or a similar crime in progress once every 8 years. And that's if he or she actually knows it's going on and is able to do something about it.
It's no good looking at Atlanta. British policing is different. I'm not going to get into an argument with the gentleman. If you're going to stay for a cup of tea, I'll have 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's fair, particularly this gentleman from the
Just one, okay, well thank you, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Well, we'll be around for a few minutes. If you want my contact details, come and get one. And I've got one small commercial thing, and I'll get shot if I don't say this. We are looking for volunteers for the independent custody visiting scheme. We have 2 custody suites where people are arrested before they're charged, okay? At Martlesham and at Bury. It's a question sometimes of looking after vulnerable people and getting an independent assessment. If anybody's interested in considering that, just pick up a leaflet and then do get in touch. Right, first of all, I would like to thank all our assistants for the tea and biscuits. Thank you very much indeed. John for coming along and filming the proceedings, which will be put up on the website, and these guys for coming and helping to answer the questions, and of course to all of you for coming along and having a pretty vigorous discussion. So thank you very much indeed, and very well done.